The alleged Idaho sniper is identified, what we're learning about 20-year-old Wess Roley, plus the latest on the big, beautiful saga of President Trump's big, beautiful bill. And a shocking twist, accused killer Bryan Kohberger taking a plea deal, admitting to the senseless slaughter of 4 college students in 2022. Those stories and more today, Tuesday, July 1st. I'm Caitlin Becker, and this is the New York Postcast. First up, the debate rages on. Senate Republicans are continuing to work toward a vote on President Trump's big, beautiful bill. A full vote had been expected Monday night, but after hours of debate and even more hours of voting on amendments, it just never came to the floor. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt, though, sounded optimistic on Monday that Republicans will eventually band together and pass this mammoth legislation.
We need the full weight of the Republican conference to get behind this bill, and we expect them to, and we are confident that they will. The president has been working hand in hand with Senate Majority Leader Thune and also our House Republican leader, or the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson.
Now, Democrats have voted en masse against this bill, criticizing it for ballooning the budget deficit, slashing Medicaid, and a whole host of other issues. There have even been some Republican outliers who have thrown up their own roadblocks, largely over spending and the cap on state and local tax deductions. Now to the latest in that horrific scene in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, where 20-year-old Wess Roley is accused of setting a brush fire so that he could ambush first responders when they arrived. Hours before the incident, Roley posted a photo of himself dressed in camouflage with a belt of rifle shells and a Bjork song playing in the background, including the lyrics, "I'm going hunting." Now, the local sheriff says that Roley was living in his car and he had been confronted by firefighters about the vehicle. The confrontation escalated to the point that he reportedly opened fire on them. Police say they pushed his car off a mountain ledge in order to keep him from escaping, and even deflated the tires of a fire engine over fears that he would steal it to get away. Now, 2 firefighters are dead after the shooting, and a third remains hospitalized in stable condition, and Roley died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Now, staying in Idaho, we have a major update in the 2022 quadruple murder of 4 University of Idaho students. Suspected killer Bryan Kohberger is taking a plea deal in order to spare his own life. News Nation reports that Kohberger will plead guilty to slaughtering Maddie Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. The move will take the death penalty off the table and put the 30-year-old behind bars for the rest of his life. Now, Kohberger stood accused of slipping into the victim's off-campus home in the dead of night and systematically massacring each and every one of them with a K-bar military knife, allegedly leaving behind that knife sheath under one of the victims' bodies, complete with his DNA on the snap. Authorities said that Kohberger, who was getting his PhD in criminology at nearby Washington State University, had stalked some of the victims for months leading up to the killings. An investigator said at the time that it was one of the bloodiest crime scenes that they had ever witnessed. And now to our big story. President Trump doubling down in his fight with Harvard University. After months of threatening rhetoric, the administration is formally accusing the elite university of violating civil rights by not doing enough to deter anti-Semitism on campus. This is the latest in the stalemate between the Trump administration and the university, who up until this point has refused to cooperate with the president's demands. The administration is once again threatening to pull federal funding over this issue. The Justice Department's task force to combat anti-Semitism sent the school a letter claiming that they were either being, quote, deliberately indifferent or a willful participant in the harassment of Jewish students. Now, the directive was sent following an investigation by the Department of Health and Human Services Office for Civil Rights. It conducted what they called listening sessions with more than 500 Jewish students, a large portion of whom reported facing discrimination and stereotyping given their views on current events. For more on this, we're joined now by the Post senior reporter Chris Nisi. So, Chris, up until now, the back and forth between the president and Harvard hasn't really carried the gravity of this formal accusation. So how does this change all of that? And what's Harvard's response?
So, Caitlin, not only might this be the latest strike, it may in fact be the last strike, depending on how all this shakes out. This letter Monday from the Trump administration's anti-Semitism task force to Harvard President Dr. Alan Garber basically put the school on notice that it's conducted a lengthy investigation and has found it to be what it calls violent violation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which, as you know, prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, and national origin for any entity receiving federal funds. What this basically means is if the school fails to immediately institute meaningful reforms to put an end to the harassment of Jewish students, faculty, and staff, it will lose all federal financial resources, which last year alone amounted to just shy of $700 million.
And what does that look like in actuality? I mean, what's at stake for Harvard if that money gets taken away? Thus far, they've been pretty adamant about not kowtowing to the president. So what would they lose in this fight, just sort of in a realistic sense?
Sure. So the Trump administration last month froze around $3.2 billion in contracts and grants with Harvard. And around that time, the General Services Administration fired off a memo to federal agencies that have research and other contracts with the university, basically instructing them to take their business elsewhere. Since that letter, Harvard said it's gotten just a torrent of grant termination letters from an alphabet soup of government agencies, from the NIH, Department of Agriculture, the Department of Energy, DOD, and HUD, saying they were terminating these awards because the projects that they had contracted with the university to do were no longer in line with the priorities of the agencies. Harvard filed a lawsuit at the time arguing the Trump administration is trying to micromanage the university under threat of hindering its ability to conduct medical and scientific research. As for specifics on how this hurts Harvard in the pocketbook, federal research grants like these made up around 11% of the university's revenue in 2024. So it's a not insignificant chunk of its coffers, considering its operating expenses that year were $6.4 billion.
And then there's, of course, the fallout of donors after that because of these optics. So that would remain to be seen. But Chris, while I have you here, you also covered the administration's new lawsuit filed against the city of Los Angeles and LA Mayor Karen Bass over the ICE riots. What's the latest on that?
So the Trump administration is suing Los Angeles, as well as Mayor Karen Bass and other top elected officials in the city, essentially claiming its sanctuary city policies hinder the federal government's ability to enforce immigration law. At issue is a city ordinance signed into law by Bass last December, which was called pretty unambiguously Prohibition of the Use of City Resources for Federal Immigration Enforcement, which the government is alleging the sole purpose of is to thwart ICE and Customs and Border Protection from carrying out their congressionally authorized obligations, which namely is arresting illegal immigrants who break the law and deporting them where appropriate. The basis of the suit is basically that LA Sanctuary City Ordinance violates the Supremacy Clause, which holds that the U.S. Constitution is the highest law of the land and that all state and local laws are subordinate to it. The government here is trying to get a federal judge to declare that Los Angeles' ordinance is unlawful and therefore unenforceable, as well as bar the defendants named in the suit, as well as their employees from enforcing it in any way.
We expect a response to that suit in the coming days or weeks, and I'm sure we will have you back on to discuss it. Chris Nisi, thank you so much.
Thanks, Caitlin.
And now to a scary incident on the high seas. The father of a young child leapt off of a cruise ship over the weekend to save his daughter after she fell overboard. Somewhere between Florida and the Bahamas, this little girl slipped from the fourth deck of a Disney cruise ship, and she plummeted into the choppy waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Well, Dad wasted no time in jumping in after her. He somehow managed to swim to her in the middle of the ocean and then tread water while holding his little girl for about 20 minutes. Now, the ship's crew lowered a bright yellow rescue boat and plucked the pair out of the water to safety. Amazing. Disney confirmed the incident, saying the successful rescue, quote, highlights the effectiveness of our safety protocols. Sure, but whoever taught Dad how to swim probably deserves a pat on the back right now. And finally today, Hertz customers are hurtin' thanks to AI. The rental car company is using a new AI system to scan cars before and after you rent them. Sounds efficient, until you hear that the computer is finding minor dings and scratches, like the size of a fingernail, and then charging an arm and a leg for them. One customer reported a $440 charge for a 1-inch scuff above the front tire. The breakdown for that is $250 for the repair, $125 for quote-unquote processing, and $65 for administration, whatever that means. And when the customer tried to contest the charge, he was met with an army of chatbots. And as we have all no doubt experienced before, no living customer service reps were there to help. Well, the Post reached out to Hertz to see what was up with the scanners, and here was their response, quote, when damage does occur, our goal is to enhance the rental experience by bringing greater transparency, precision, and speed to the process. But customers say the only thing they're enhancing are profits. And if you were thinking, well, I'll just use a different company. Bad news there. The company behind the scanners has plans to not only expand with Hertz, but they're already in talks with other rental car companies too. Walking actually seems like a nice alternative there. That does it for us today. For more on these stories and everything else you could possibly want to know, check out the New York Post in print or online. And don't forget, like and subscribe to the New York Postcast wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. You will be glad you did. I'm here with you every morning, giving you headlines and gossip, pretty much everything you need to start your day.